Hey guys. Whoa, hey guys. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to Coding After 30. We are going to have a guest today. We're just waiting for everybody and everything to set up. It happens. I'm actually running a little bit late myself, but we'll get him in here. It's going to be DJ Norris. He's a web developer from NASA. He has an interesting story of how he got started in web development. And what I like to talk to him about is the discipline it takes. Like, what does it take to get a job as a web developer? And everybody has a different journey, but I'd love to talk about and hear, what he's gone through. And the more people I bring in from different parts of life to kind of share with us how they were able to get into web development, I think it'll be most helpful for you guys. Because it's important to hear how other people did it, because you model other people's success to get to where you want to go. So with that being said, say hello in the comments. Love to hear from you guys. Love to see how you guys doing. It's going to be an amazing, fun time. I'm excited for the stream. And in this stream, we're going to talk about becoming a web developer in 2021 with DJ Norris and myself. And he's going to be on in a little bit. Let me check here. Hey, we're just going to try it and see if it happens. 1 second. Let me bring you in here. Hey, can you hear me? Mic check. We're going to do it live. It is what it is. I could hear you. Can you hear me? I might be delayed, or I might not be delayed. Yeah. Switch it up here a little bit. So, I don't know if you could hear me. Because we could hear you really good. Moving around. So, it's basically you're not being able to hear me yet. All right, just technical difficulties, but we'll be back. We'll figure it out. So that's the nature of being live. It happens all the time, but we are going to talk about what it takes to become a web developer. And basically, that's what we're going to talk about. And let's see, and jump into the comments. You guys say hello. You guys joining us here for Coffee, Code, and Chat. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a great time today. No matter what happens, we are going to have fun. So let me just double check here something here. Yep. But you guys say hello in the comments. I want to say hello to you guys. We're going to have great time. Great time on today's stream, as always. Yes. Let's see here. Let's see in the comments. We have greetings from Argentina. Greetings, Adrian. Nice. Hey, what's going on? Hey, hello. Let gay be equal true. Okay, so we're gonna talk about what it takes to become a web developer. We have a guest coming in. Look, we're semi-professional. That's what it is. And sometimes we're gonna have these difficulties, and it's okay. But we're gonna work it out, and we're gonna jump in. But we are going to talk about what it takes to get into web development. Our guest has a very good story, and I do want to talk about the big D. And it's not the D in dev, and it's not the D you're thinking about, but it's D of discipline. Being disciplined enough to do what it takes to be able to, get everything's done that is required. You know what I mean? And so we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna talk about it, but keep saying hello in the comments as we get started here. And it's gonna be great. By the way, guys, while you guys joining us, while we're waiting for DJ Norris to jump in here, I want to show you something, guys. So whenever you're starting out, no, he's coming in here. Let's try this again first. All right, he's here. Let me go. He's getting ready. He's in the guest room. Yeah, this is amazing. This is the high level of production. We have a guest room here where we're able to come in and chat. So let me put him here. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Can you hear me now? I'm assuming yes.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Hey, don't worry about any of this like technology, man. It's just always going to be something. So I'm just glad to have you here. And so thank you for coming on and joining us.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to be here. That's the difference between Linux and Windows for broadcast stuff.
Yes. I used to use OBS, and it's like building a rocket ship every time you want to do a live stream. So I decided to like switch to something else, and now I'm on a Mac where, thankfully, things are less, problematic. But anyway, thank you for coming in, and to the viewers or the few that are watching, let's just start by kind of giving us like who you are and how you got to where you are today working at NASA as a developer.
Yeah, so my name's DJ Norris. I had a really long story, but I'll shorten it up a lot. So, did the military for a while, then decided to do what my best friend did and started doing HVAC for the union for DC. So I'd go to like White House, FBI, all that stuff, and fix their equipment. They had an apprenticeship program that was 5 years long. So I started doing that, and I was doing college at the same time because I knew I wanted to do something computer related. And I started with computer science and then switched to cybersecurity. So I was working and doing the apprenticeship, which is like a college, and then doing college at the same time. Probably, I think it was last year of college. I figured out that cybersecurity really wasn't what I wanted to do, and it was so hard to get into without a clearance that I was just hitting roadblocks left and right. So I decided to pivot, and I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to do coding. So I started learning to code, and I was, doing all the things I mentioned beforehand, and then started learning code also. A few months later, I graduated, so I had college off my plate, and I was still doing apprenticeship, and then I was taking the time that I was doing college to code. So that was basically, between college and then replacing that with coding, I was doing the 120 hours a week average of work, and decided to quit the apprenticeship and leave the union and just go all out towards coding. So from time that I first started, since I wrote my first line of code learning HTML to having a job was 2.5 months.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
Yes, I was ultra aggressive with it though. So
that sounds aggressive. I mean, 2.5 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not really getting the job that's the hard part. It's keeping it.
Okay.
So you can, just like people who lie on their interviews, which I'm not saying I did. I had a lot of conversations, and the owner said he knew exactly where I was at with my coding, which was almost nowhere. But you pretty much have to, it's a sink or swim situation. So you have to back up everything you say. So when I got the job, that's when the real work began. I spent all night, every night, and slept less than, sometimes 2 hours a night, sometimes 4, trying to keep myself afloat and not get fired. And I ended up doing an average of 120 hours a week or a little more for about a year straight. And then I started getting comfortable.
Yeah, so that definitely sounds like you definitely put in the work, and it doesn't sound like it was an easy adjustment because of 120-hour weeks and stuff like that. And so what you just described to me, you basically had, and you could correct me if I'm right or wrong, that you had the mentality of this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do it. I don't think, or I don't get the hint of the fact that like you were like, maybe it's not going to happen. Like you weren't going to take no for an answer, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's kind of like Tack Rally was saying, where he codes like he's broke. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not an option. It's kind of your life depends on it, kind of thing. It has to work, or you're gonna be homeless.
Right, right.
So that's kind of the attitude I take with it, and it's worked well so far. It might be part of the discipline stuff from the Navy,
Yeah.
maybe. I think more of it is just personally ingrained because I know that while military and other institutions teach you values, at a certain point it comes from within. You have to be intrinsically motivated to be able to push on and stay disciplined.
Yeah, but like I would say there's got to be something about, what's the limit of like the amount of pushing you're going to do before you're going to decide to quit. And it seems like that was definitely not something you even thought about it. And I think that a lot of people who get started, any first roadblock they hit, they're like, oh, it's not for me, and they just give up. You know what I mean? And so like I think discipline plays like a big part because there's a lot of people I talk to and they want to ask for help. They want to ask about like, how do you do this? And then when you tell them it takes work, it's like they still keep asking like, but what's the secret? Like, what is the magic formula? Like, what did you do that was it? I don't know. I just stayed up all night and studied and built stuff. You know what I mean? Um, so like I think discipline is very important, and the way you talk about it, I think like you kind of like talking about like it's a given, like oh everybody does that. It seems to me, but the truth is, it's I just want people to know that it is work that goes into it. So, um, like I know a lot of people gonna be like, well, he got a college degree, that must have like did something, but I'm like how much of your college degree actually helped you getting this dev job, even
It
though you
hurt.
studied like cybersecurity?
No, it actually hurt me. I had to explain
Oh
myself.
my gosh. Yeah.
Yep. So it has nothing to do with programming, and every person there knew that. And every interview I did, everybody knew that.
Right.
And it was just as hard as if I didn't have a degree. They didn't care. None of them cared if somebody had a degree or not. And now that I do part of the hiring process within my group, I see that same thing. I see that none of them care. They want somebody who can do the work, somebody who's motivated.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I found in every interview I've gone to. Uh, I'm sure there's some company somewhere where you just need the piece of paper, but it's getting, few and far between now, from what
Yeah.
I'm hearing at least.
Yeah. And so now that you've been like on the part of the hiring side, part of like trying to get hired when you first started out. So, what three things, and you just briefly touched them, are you looking in someone when you're looking to hire them? Like, so if someone's like looking to
Well,
get a job as a web developer today, and what should they focus on?
yeah, the biggest thing is motivation to me.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't have a lot of motivation, and well, okay, so they can fake it.
Yeah.
Anybody can fake motivation, but that's fine. I can't really control that. I can only control what's going on in the interview room and my judgment of them based on them at that time. If they seem motivated during the interview and excited about what they're doing, I don't care if they make a JavaScript calculator, which I hope nobody does as a
Right.
portfolio item. But even if they do that, I want them to be so proud of it and so motivated about it that I believe in what they're doing by the end of the interview. Uh, that's number one for me. I'm sure other people in the interview room don't feel that way, but nobody's argued with me yet.
Right.
Um, Another thing is actually having some kind of work to present to me so I know that you're not just outright lying about things.
Yeah.
And, part of that will come in when companies give a lot of code tests or
Yep.
they do whiteboarding or whatever. Uh, we take a little bit different approach. I'm going to standardize it a little more. So I actually will just verbally ask people questions and watch their reaction.
Yeah.
And that to me, when I see a shift in their eyes, I can kind of tell whether they have no clue or they have an idea or they're offended that I asked them. You
Yeah.
know, one of three things will work, and that's enough for me. This last person that I think he starts Monday. Actually, he came from. Well, I probably shouldn't talk about that. He came from a large financial tech company, and I was pretty excited about maybe bringing him on board because I think he can bring a lot to the table. Um, but I couldn't ask him any questions because at his level, it's kind of offensive, according to the other people in the group. So so I started probing and asking tech questions without asking him, and
Yep.
I could see his demeanor every time he would answer, and I knew instantly that's the guy I want. A lot of times when you talk through stuff, even if it's whiteboard, if you don't know what it is, if it's even typing on the computer and you're just voice chatting and they're watching your screen,
Yeah.
being confident and excited about what you're doing is important. So I guess really that comes back to motivation too. Uh, and really, I don't look for much else because guaranteed nobody's going to know the tools we use.
Right.
Um, we use everything from C to Perl, Python, Fortran.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, I, we use so many legacy, and I've got Next.js I've brought in also. So we use everything up to the latest. I wouldn't say cutting edge stuff, but recent stuff. But there's no way they're going to know all that stuff, but they will touch it and they will learn it. And it's just important for them to have a high level motivation coming in because they're going to need it if they're going to read some C code or Perl code
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
let's
C
say,
is, yeah.
3,000 lines long,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out a race condition in a language you don't know. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So like motivation, being, confident probably, being able to talk about the questions that people ask you, and also actually knowing what you're doing. And I think like what you mentioned, like looking at people's eyes and seeing how they respond, I think that's so magical because you could tell right away when people, they're
Yep.
either recalling something or they're trying to make something up. There's because it happens in two different places, and you could tell when people are doing it because you can't like BS about like your way through, like all the way through the interview. So I think it's cool like to watch people and see what they say. But so when coming back to this point, because I do want to talk about in your experience, like if you had to describe the process of learning to code, was it easy for you or was it difficult? you know
Oh, it's extraordinarily difficult.
like what were
I
some of the
the
challenges you were having?
Oh man, everything. For one, I started on Windows. I had never touched Linux in my life,
Oh,
so I
wow.
wasn't at that point yet.
Yeah.
So just getting my environment set up. I mean, for one, it took me a week, probably because of Windows, but
Yeah.
live and learn. After I got that worked out, I couldn't get HTML right, couldn't figure out the syntax, and kind of just working through errors really helped with that. With CSS also,
Yep.
um, JavaScript was a lot harder for me. It took a long time to learn.
Yep.
React. React actually made me a better JavaScript developer,
It's
surprisingly.
funny how that works because a lot of people say,
Yeah,
don't learn React until you master JavaScript. And I would say you should know JavaScript, the basic language and syntax, but jump into React as fast as possible because it's just such a better way to make stuff. And you'll never, ever want to go back to vanilla JavaScript ever again once working with React. That's just like the fact that nobody wants to believe me. That's brand new. They're like, no, I'm going to spend time in JavaScript. It's like, what are you doing?
yeah. Well, I had full intentions on doing that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be a person who jumped into a framework too early.
Yep. Yep.
So I was learning, and I was kind of learning wrong. I mean, right and wrong. I learned enough to get myself a job,
Yep.
but at the same time, I picked up a Udemy course from Maximilian,
Yep.
and he goes deep in the weeds,
Yeah.
and it's just way too much for anybody who hasn't been doing JavaScript long.
Yep.
So that kind of brought me to a halt. And when I came in and started my job, excuse me, I was there about 2 weeks, and the owner was like, "Oh, we have this application that's like a tracking system for the state of that I live in, and it's in Angular. I want you to do all these modifications on it." I'm like, "Well, I don't know Angular." And he's like, "Okay, I'll take care of it then, but I want you to start on this other application for another client." And he was like, "I want you to do that in Angular." And I was like, "Well, why don't I try React?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "I heard great things about it."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Okay, well then go do it." So that's when I made the shift over to React, and I just went full into it and started connecting the dots into
Yep.
regular JavaScript, and that really like solidified it for me. I came back, and all the issues I had with DOM manipulation, with creating objects and all the little random things, I had no issues at all.
Yeah.
So I think React is great to jump into once you have basic DOM manipulation down.
Yeah.
And I mean, really going back to you saying nobody would ever want to do vanilla JavaScript again. Um, I've actually created 2 applications recently that are all vanilla JavaScript for production
Wow.
and not use React. Now they are not massive applications.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was gonna be my
but
question. It's like,
we've had enough pushback that that I decided to just do them in vanilla JavaScript, and I might come back later and do them in React.
yeah, yeah.
But
So,
that in itself was an interesting process too.
so I want to come back to something you said, like you were learning things the wrong way. Like, what do you mean exactly by that? Some things you were doing right,
Oh,
but certain things were just, you're like, oh, because very easy for people to get sidetracked when learning to code, especially as being self-taught.
yeah. So that was what I mentioned with Maximilian and his
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
I really believe if you want to do web development, you should stick with learning what's necessary for web development. DOM manipulation,
yep,
getting stuff from APIs,
yep,
parsing that data, even if it's nasty format of data,
yep,
and you need it to be in nested objects with nested arrays, and you want it flat by the time you use it for the front end.
yep.
Learn that. Don't learn the fastest way to concatenate a string. I don't know. I'm using that as an example.
No, yeah,
But
I got you.
nobody cares if it takes zero 0.3 seconds versus
Yep.
0.45 seconds for web development until you get to a very, very
Yeah,
specific
when it becomes a
part
problem.
of that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
yes.
that,
And most
that
of the
that's
time it doesn't.
yeah, and it's a good point you mentioned that because this is where like it's like if you don't have a product, you can't optimize it. So like you got to build something beforehand, bring it to the market, and then when it becomes an issue, you could work on it. And that's kind of like and I could ask you about this in just a moment, like how many like algorithm questions you practice before getting your job. Because in my case, it's like learn that like not at the beginning. Like, learn how to build stuff, build actual projects, build actual things that you could sell to clients, learn how to do the thing you're gonna get hired to do, and then you could focus on algorithm and data structures. Because I've been at my company for a year and a half, and I have not done anything that was so complex where my knowledge of, data structures and different algorithms, which one's faster than the other, just was irrelevant. You know what I mean?
Yes, even now we make it work first and then we optimize later.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's sometimes, that makes things tough if, you have a team of like 60 people, but we don't. So we, adjust accordingly. That's why each place is different. They have different requirements, all that, different teams. But yes, I absolutely agree with what you said. I knew nothing about algorithms. I knew nothing about any type of sorting. I knew what an object and an array were. And nobody at my current job has asked me about any type of data structures other than that. Any type of sorting, any algorithm type questions. We have people that do scientific programming. We have 30 people that do it. Not a single one of them has ever asked me any of that stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm deep in a scientific group in NASA.
right. Yeah, you do work at
And
NASA. I mean,
yes,
which is
and
hilarious.
have not been asked once. Now
Yeah,
I am learning things because
right.
I feel like that's a huge gap in my knowledge. And I think everybody should fill in the blanks,
100%,
eventually.
100%. And I think like everybody's gonna go on that computer science road at some point to get better understanding of how things work underneath the hood. But Gav, a
Yep.
couple of questions. This is a good one because I was
Oh,
going to ask
absolutely.
you the same thing. I'm glad Web Dev Junkie asked it. It's pushback from what? Using React? Exactly. Like, who the hell would say not use React? Especially if you're doing JavaScript. I'm just biased about React.
Well, I can't get too deep into that
Right. I
because
got you.
that
I got you.
that gets that gets into politics. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I have Next.js in there, so I do have React.
Yeah. There you go.
Um, but the difference is how the servers are rendering the stuff and how we're serving it to people.
Okay. I see. I see what you
So
mean.
as long as it becomes static files and it's served as static
Ah, I
files,
see.
then
I
it's
see
all
what you
good.
mean. Yeah. So React in that case would not help you guys unless you're using something like Next.js, which creates the static file server side.
Yes, and Next.js did not serve my purposes for the other two applications.
Okay. I see what
It
you mean.
it can, but I would have to do a lot more bending over backwards to make it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, and that's a good point you just made because there's so many different things that you learn, and it's like if in your hand all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail, and
Yep.
I was like, when would you not use React? And exactly the situation you're in. So I'm glad you had a good answer for us because
Yep.
but it's more. There's some more questions here. Um, Cody Snyder, did you have a good understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before starting React?
So HTML and CSS, I could do anything I wanted. Uh, I could take people's stuff. Like, okay, so the person or the platform I was learning from at the time, he would he would do what he called live coding. He wouldn't
Yeah,
pre-prep stuff like Udemy courses kind of do, and
yeah,
everything's magical and perfect.
yeah,
Um, he would hit errors and show his errors and show the stack trace and be like, "All right, we'll start figuring this out." And he would start like just messing with stuff. I would pause the video at that point and figure it out myself,
yeah,
and then watch his solution and compare it to mine. That helped me immensely. So I was good with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I struggled, like,
yeah,
really. I mean, that's
yeah,
why I talked about, once I got the job was when the real work began, because I had to back my enthusiasm and, everything, me saying I know JavaScript, up to the degree that I make the owner feel comfortable.
yeah.
So so basically I would say my JavaScript was not good enough at all.
Right.
Uh, and I filled in the blanks.
Yeah. So
So
like, with in terms of HTML and CSS, just to kind of break it down, like the most basic thing you think you should be able to do is if someone gives you a mock-up or an image of something that resembles a website, you should at least be able to code that with HTML and CSS. That's like your basic
Yeah,
like entry level thing. Like it's
a
like if you
hundred
can't
percent.
do that, you got to be able to do that. Like so if someone's trying to test like do I know enough HTML and CSS? Find a random website and then see if you could recreate it with HTML and CSS. I think that's because in my mind, if you could do that, that means you're delivering a service that someone will pay you for. Taking a design and translating it into a website. If you can't do that, why would someone hire you? And like I don't say it to be mean, but it's just you got to have certain expectations that you have to be able to do the work rather than just conceptually talking about it. And um, you struggled with JavaScript, and what was the hardest part about JavaScript in your opinion?
Man, I don't everything. uh, so I could get element by ID or query selector. Query selector would mess with me. Didn't understand query selector all. I didn't understand when something came back as a node list why I was getting errors.
Right.
Uh, I just really everything. Everything I did felt like I was just bashing my head against the wall. And then when I started, learning classes with React and all that, oh yeah, if somebody starts learning React, honestly, I would say learn classes first and then
Yeah.
move on to hooks.
Damn, bro, you're
I
making
That's
everybody's
not
job harder. Come on,
not
gotta give them the
popular.
easy way. Gotta give them the easy answer, bro.
Yeah, not popular, but that in itself, I think, is what really showed me where I was lacking in my JavaScript skills. Um, Hooks kind of abstract stuff more.
Oh
It,
yeah,
it
they make
feels
it
more like
easier.
magic.
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah,
is
so
really like magic for sure.
I don't think I would get the same effect if I went back and only had hooks to work with. Um, so yeah, I really can't pinpoint one specific thing because I felt like it was everything. And then just one day, like a light bulb, it was there and it clicked. It
Yeah,
wasn't me seeing myself getting better with time. It was just like one day I'm like, oh, I got this.
yeah. It's crazy that you say that because I used to when I was first starting out, like brand new. I have a bunch of friends who are in the industry, and I was like, how do you know when you become no longer a beginner? Like, how do you know? And like, what do I like? I would ask them, what should I look for so I know I'm making progress? And they never like really had an answer that was satisfactory enough. And I was like, because I'm like, then how am I supposed to know when I'm actually making progress? And then after coding for a long time, I'm like, I don't remember when I stopped being a beginner. Like, I don't, it's just something that exactly what you said. Things just click and things just make sense. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is because it's such a weird kind of transition, like nobody knows if they're that one step or 10 steps away from that point, and then a lot of people get discouraged and quit. And what I tell you, it's like for me, like I'm Russian, I make the joke that we're all about like suffering and pain because that's basically all we did for most of our lives. And so for me, sitting in front of my computer banging my head against the monitor, that's normal. And so I could do that. But I think like if someone doesn't persevere, and coming back to this idea of discipline, where I think you have, like, regardless if you got it through like the way you grew up from the military, that part is something that played a big role in you to be able to just persevere through things and struggle through the code. And do you remember who was the live coding guy you watched, or is it no one in particular?
Oh yeah, it was a coding phase.
Oh, coding. Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
So Coding Phase has got a lot of great stuff, and I like when people do live coding. I used to watch Coding Phase. Love the guy. There's another guy, Dev Mentor Live. He puts out like a lot of live coding stuff, and that's something that a lot of people don't see who code because on those Udemy tutorials, any tutorial you do, you're seeing the final project that's been tested before they release the course. So all the
Right.
mistakes, all the issues, all the bugs, they already were ironed out. But that is the biggest part of learning to code. And so if you're not spending time in front of your code editor and failing, you're actually missing out on the most important like learning part. And I'm glad you said that. And let's see here if you have any questions.
So talking about that, I work well with another person, sort of. Um, we spend time talking each day about problems we're both having. That's kind of the extent of us working together. He's been a developer for 20 years. He still gets errors every single day and works through errors. The the more we do and the more advanced we get, the longer we can go with writing something without having an error. But
Right.
we still hit errors and we still have to work through them. It never ends. So it would be important to find whoever you learn from to go through those errors, to have somebody who presents errors, because that is what you're going to hit all the time. If
Right.
everything worked perfectly, we would be out of a job because nothing would ever break.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. Like even at my company, like it's surprising. Even some of the higher level developers, they'll run into bugs that will take him, a day or two to solve. So it's not like people that know what to do. They just have no issue, no problem, and things just work. It is part of like
Oh yeah.
solving, finding bugs and stuff like that. Um, like I did have a question, kind of escaped me for a moment, but I'll see if I can remember. But when you were going through college, you were working, what was your schedule like? Because you, like, I guess at the period where you decided like, okay, like security is not going to do it for me, I'm having all these issues, I'm working, like when you were the most in your busiest moment, how was your schedule looking in terms of study? Like when did you have time to study, I guess?
All right. So I'll go with when I was going super hardcore.
Yeah.
And I'll start with when I graduated college because I was doing less time coding the last month of college. Um, so I would get up at 3:30 in the morning and I would go to work. I would
Yep.
be home by 2. I would go to my apprenticeship from 4:15 until 8 p.m. Get home by 8:30. Code until either midnight or 1 a.m. and then do everything over again.
Wow.
So
So like,
I just did it until, you know, I made it.
yeah, no excuses. And it's funny, like, a lot of developers, they read and watch their developer logs. I used to be in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I knew a lot of like police guys, a lot of law enforcement guys, a lot of like military guys, and so like I got introduced to Jocko and Goggins, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and those guys just basically tell you, look, you got to do the fucking work, like you got to put in the
Right.
and. Goggins is hilarious. If you ever want motivational quotes, just go see anything Goggins says. Basically, he's like just stop being a bitch and do the work. And those are his words, not mine. But that's something that like people have to understand. And like I do get like some pushback at this. I don't know why, but it's like you can't get something for not putting in the work. And if anything, if you put in the work, you're not guaranteed that you're even going to succeed. You just have to do the work. You have to go through the process in order to get your goal. So like I get a lot of like times where people's like, oh, I don't have time to do anything. Well, nobody has time to do anything. Like I don't have
Right.
time. You don't have time. Nobody has time. So where do you find time? Well, it's the things you say no to and the things you sacrifice. Like a lot of times, like I just don't sleep. You know what I mean? I'm not, it's just the way it
Yeah.
is. So that's what
Yep.
people have to do. By the way, all of you guys who are tuning in, thanks for joining us. I'm here with DJ Norris. Just talk about what it takes to become a web developer in 2021. Just dropping some truth bombs for you guys. So if you guys have any questions, let us know in the comments. We'd love to answer them for you. And as always, if you haven't liked the stream, like the stream because it really helps others discover. And remember, you guys are the most important part of the stream. So please ask questions because without you guys, this channel would never exist. And then we do have a question here. Do we have a Discord or something? Yeah, my answer would be like something like that. Because I just started it. I am no expert in Discord, but I am trying to kind of get people involved there. So I'll paste the link here. If you guys want to join, just bear with me. It's going to be a process of setting up. And, the Discord channel, there's going to be like a couple of things we're going to do. Obviously, have a great community, but I do have this path for someone looking to build a portfolio to get hired, which is super important. I kind of sharing the path that I took in terms of building projects and what is required. And we kind of talked a little bit about it, knowing HTML and CSS, what you should be able to do with JavaScript, this idea of like, it's not just learning the language, you should be familiar with doing basic DOM manipulation, and more importantly, being able to talk to an API, get that data, and be able to do stuff with data. And I think after that point, you could start learning like React and stuff like that. So at your current job right now, what is the hardest thing that you still have to deal with?
Well, since I do everything from server configs all the way to front end, you know what? Ignoring all that, server stuff is hard. Setting it up properly and securely is very hard. But working on other people's legacy code in languages that I'm not expert in, and all the people who designed it are gone. That is the hardest thing.
I don't mean to laugh.
And
It's too close
no,
to
that's
home.
fine. Everything starts. It doesn't matter where it is. I mean, I'm where I am. Facebook started the exact same way with a couple guys, just like my group started with a couple guys who, bootstrap projects and didn't document anything. And then they grew from there. We're in our growing process right now. We're hiring on more people. I'm probably going to be the one to document things. I've created an internal documentation site and been trying to stay on top of people to document things. Meanwhile, I'm moving so fast, I'm the biggest hypocrite out of everybody. And, it just makes it hard. I've got some code I've got multiple pieces of code that are 3,000 lines long. And this guy, I'd classify him as near genius level. He just, some of the things he does mystifies people who've been coding for 30 years.
Right.
And they just say they don't know and leave it. So then I come in to figure it out. So that's very hard. No way around it.
Yeah, like the one thing you touched on, this idea of coming into legacy or even like code base that you yourself didn't design, and anybody that knows anything about anything no longer works there. And that's kind of like something that is very common at my company because we have such a high turnover rate that a lot of times people come in and they actually like, you know what, let's just simultaneously break up the team and start building a new thing based on the old thing. Because nobody wants to do anything with like the old code because it's every change you make is a breaking change. You know what I mean? And so like it's kind of funny, like the real problems that you do encounter, but it's the way it is sometimes. So yeah, and it's when you first started working, like did you get like from what you told me before? I think the answer is no, but I just want to kind of ask it anyway. Did you get any mentoring when you were learning and starting out from higher developers? But I think you were the main guy when you started in terms of the thing that you were working on.
Okay. Well, so I'm in charge of a project within our group.
Okay.
And there are multiple projects within the same group, and me and two other guys are the main people that deal with all this stuff. So I have sole responsibility of the one project, but I also help them on the other project. And if I get stuck, they help me on my project. I did have them to fall on. I did have other people who could give me general ideas like, hey, you're doing this in Perl and you're not using this array syntax properly. Like I did have people to fall back on for that.
Nice.
And if not, it would have been a lot harder. But as far as figuring out what's happening in the code, everybody's just kind of stumbling through it and figuring it out at the same time.
Yeah. So I do have another question here. So you started with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but then you talked about like Perl and other languages that you have never done. So when learning to code, like the key aspect of it is not try to learn everything, learn one language well so you understand the basic principles of programming. So when you do look at another language, you're not lost because you have good foundation and the basics rather than trying to learn every technology under the sun. Because I didn't really become better developer until I stopped learning everything else and just focused on JavaScript. But I could tell you I'm at a point, and most developers who are like basically understand programming principles could look at any programming language and kind of make sense of what they're looking at.
Yeah, a for loop always looks like a for loop.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess not machine learning, but
Right.
or I'm sorry, machine assembly language.
Yeah.
I should
know
make
what you
that
meant. I know
distinction.
what you meant. Yeah,
So,
that's too. Yeah.
but anyway, uh, speaking of that, I wanted to mention this earlier, and people always worry about looking smart in interviews and stuff. Um, I came in an interview and sat in front of a panel of people, and we were all talking. I described the last project I did, which was in React. The API was in Golang. Uh, Backend was MongoDB, and there was a whole bunch of C and Perl code behind that for what was actual machine learning.
Right.
And it was to detect shotgun blasts and explosions versus maybe blanks in a gun or
Well, that's
somebody
nuts.
dropping a rock off a roof. Yeah, well, the guy that created that machine learning stuff, it is incredible, and he's been actually studying that specific thing since the early '60s for a Ivy League university, and they hired him on for this job. So I did the database, the API, and the front end in React. But I was explaining all that stuff, and it kind of wowed the guy I was replacing, who was, exactly in my spot now.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, how do you feel about Perl?" He was like, "All our code right now is in Perl." And he's speaking of the specific project I'm in charge of. And I was like, "Well, I don't know it at all, but if you give me a few weeks, I can have a working knowledge by the time I start."
Yeah.
And they gave me 3 weeks from the time interview to start date. They gave me a job offer the next day. So
Yeah.
as soon as I had that piece of paper, I started learning Perl on my own. I didn't
Yeah.
wait until I got there. So
Right. Right.
the point of what I was saying is, don't be afraid to say you don't know something, but
100%.
follow it up with the motivation. Well, with the excitement to learn things, and present that to them and say, "Hey, I'm willing to do this and make this work." And they liked that. And I would like if somebody told me that.
And it's the same story I had because when I got hired, I have no degree. My job was in a totally different field. I used to break people's legs for a living. I'm kidding, of course. Don't hurt me, YouTube. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. And it's so different from development. So when I went to my interview, the guy's like, "Look, you have no experience. You're telling me you know React." And he's trying to just call bullshit on everything I'm saying. And then he's like, "Look," but I was like really motivated. I was really excited the way I talked about coding. And then he goes, "Look, I know you're a React guy, but everybody else here is a React guy. We also need people to do our back end. So you're going to need to know C#." And I'm like, "I don't know C#, but I'm willing to learn it." I kind of said the same thing. And he was like, "Well, if you're going to put in the work and you're willing to learn the language, fine, you're hired." And I did the same thing. As soon as I came home, I started doing like tons of C# interviews to make sure I'm prepared to when I get to work. And in my head, I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this." And, but it was much harder than I anticipated. But I think that willingness to learn and going beyond the call of duty is like super important, because but coming back to the learning thing, it's like at your job, things are going to change. And you just always have to have that mentality of being a lifelong learner and being willing to learn the thing that you need to do to get whatever you need to do to like make that project happen, So
Yeah, and back to discipline, you just have to put aside what you're doing for a little bit and to just do it. I mean,
yeah,
you don't have to have motivation to do it. Even when something new in your work comes up,
yeah,
you can't always learn on the job. You might have to
yeah,
take a weekend and put aside going to the bar to do something.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a requirement of web development of our career.
Yes, yes, yes. If you're not willing to learn outside of work, you're not going to go far in this career. And that's just like, it's not one of those 9 to 5 jobs. Like, you work 9 to 5, you could have a pretty good schedule, but you still have to do some sort of coding outside of work or like keeping up with things that are coming out. But let's take a look at some questions here. Um, Hey Jordan, I've learned React and Redux and I just started applying for jobs. Should I learn GraphQL or study data structures? What I would say right now is, because I kind of know like where you're coming from, but just kind of talk to everybody else. Like when you're learning it, let's say I use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and Redux as the example, don't learn anything else. Like just become really good at those technologies and just apply to get jobs with those things. The biggest thing that happens, people try to jump and learn something new, learn something new, learn something new, and then they just learn nothing. And with what you just mentioned is, in my opinion, is enough to get a job. And the more important focus would be is making sure that we have a portfolio that will get that point across to someone looking at it, that we know what we're doing. So make sure you have good projects and the tech used that you currently know, instead of trying to learn something new. And by the way, like when you applied to your job, what did you have for your portfolio?
Oh, can I add on to that
Oh yeah,
before
yeah.
I
Sorry.
answer
Like you.
that?
By the way, I'm
So,
still trying to learn this whole thing of talking to people. So definitely interrupt me, and if you have a good point to make, because that's more important to me than me like blabbling on.
okay, so I've been staring at Jordan's GraphQL question for a while now. Um, I agree 100% with what Paul says on GraphQL. If you want to do anything with GraphQL, if there's a job that says it requires it, just read about what it is in the documentation before you go in and have everything else down so well that you can talk about GraphQL, but you don't necessarily need to be practicing it. It it should be enough. There will be some companies, I won't call them elitist, but there are some toxic people out there who will not feel that way. But the reality is, like, even if you do take the time and waste the energy to go into GraphQL when you could become more of an expert in Redux, it's still not going to be to the level of an enterprise application. So
Right.
you're still going to be at a beginner level to them, whether you just read through the documentation and understand what it does, or maybe do a quick tutorial, um, versus spending weeks on it. I would say for Redux, if you're going to continue with it, and this like part of getting better with it, learn a different couple different kinds of Redux patterns, like the duck pattern, for instance. A lot of people love that pattern for Redux, and it's super popular. And I would also try to figure out a replacement for it, like just using context and hooks,
Yeah, I was gonna
and
quickly.
know the difference.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like we actually had Redux. Since you already learned Redux, I didn't want to like say that because you already learned Redux. But anybody new starting out with React, learn to do everything you possibly can with Context API first, and because at the job that I'm working at, we use Redux, but for our purposes it was overkill. So we went back to using Context API, and it made more sense. So, and a lot of companies now for new projects, unless there's a really specific use case, they'll just use context. So, like my question, this is something I learned the hard way because I started doing the same thing, learning Redux first. And then my friend who's a developer, he goes, Paul, like, why are you learning Redux? I'm like, I don't know, because it's state management. And then his next question, like, was like, what problem does it solve? And I had no idea. I don't know what problem. So it's just another way to manage state. But he's like, but why would you use Redux? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. He's like, then don't use it. Use Context API because unless you have a problem that you require to use Redux, don't use it. But that's the thing that I keep saying to everyone. It's like there's always going to be a new shiny thing coming out. Learn the basics of of what you're working at, because next day there's always going to be something new. But for your job interview, you just have to be knowledgeable in the things that you know, and then people will see that you took the time to learn the few things you know, and they know that you know how to learn, and they know that whatever new thing they're using, like in your case, you had to learn to look at Perl, um, which I'm sorry, but
I use it
you
every
know you
day.
you
I
use it
actually
every
like it
day.
now.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, every
Yeah,
day
but
at some
listen,
point.
yeah, but but that's a niche market. You could get the big bucks. Here's a question that I wanted to see. We could give our feedback. What's the best way to learn how to code? 38 years old, a dad with little time to do much. I'll let you answer this question first.
Well, me and you, Paul, both started learning to code at the same age.
Yeah.
Um, so we're not far from that. I was
No.
35. Uh, so my answer to that is, besides, discipline and actually doing the work, it's doing focused work.
Right.
So with who I used to learn at first, I ignored absolutely everything else. I didn't care what the newest thing was. I knew the basics of the web, from what I was told, were HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I focused on that. Um, and then this person had a timeline of courses. He said, you follow this order if you want to get a job. So I followed his videos in order up to his React course, and then I had to branch out to Udemy.
Yep.
Um, just following, focused learning and following a plan to get where you
Yep.
want. HTML first, you know, um, CSS, do everything you can with that. PSDs to HTML, getting it perfect, and then adding interactivity with JavaScript, then adding APIs in, then maybe moving to React, or you can continue with vanilla JavaScript.
Yeah.
But you'll be job ready at that point for a junior position at some places, not every place.
Yeah. My here's the thing about like there's always something that will make you feel like you don't have time to do anything. And like I want to sympathize, but listen, I used to be married, then I got divorced. My daughter now, she's like 22. She's actually in the Navy. She's going for her first deployment. Pretty proud of her. But the point is, there's always things that come up, and like I'll give you this as a story to illustrate. Like you just have to sacrifice certain things. So after my divorce, I just wanted to be single all the time. But that's going out, that's talking to people, it's dressing up, it's all this nonsense that took so much time that I ended up just getting a girlfriend that now I ended up like we're gonna get married. But I got because like that's time I could not go to bars trying to find someone new. So like it's like a joke, but the idea is you have to cut certain things out and make sacrifices. If it's like going to bed late, waking up early, you kind of have to do that because I'm gonna be like, this is what I tell my daughter, and I'm just gonna say this because like I don't want anybody to think like I'm trying to single anybody out. I tell my daughter, I'm like, look, I made mistakes when I was 18 and 19 that I'm still paying for in my late 30s. That's something I have to live with, and that's something I could never get back. And so we all make decisions that either take us to the direction we want to go or not. And the more like decisions that you made that are difficult, or you choose not to make them, the older you get, the harder things get. So like if you're 28, it's easier to learn to code if you're 38. And at 38 or 30, and then it gets even more harder when you get older, you have to make more sacrifices. It's like you got to be like, look, I guess I'm not going to sleep. I guess because I need this time to study to code. Yeah, because otherwise you're not going to make it. It's just like, it's kind of like sad truth, but the older you get, the harder things are. And that's when you have to cut things out of your life. Like I don't have a personal life. I don't say it to like impress anybody. It's because I can't afford to even now, like because I only been at my company for 1 year and a half, and I'm trying to be the best developer I can. And for me, I kind of have to live, breathe this developer lifestyle of like I watch, instead of Netflix, I watch coding tutorials. Like everything is code related, and people's like, Paul, you have no life. I know, but how else was I supposed to break into the goddamn field? you know
Right.
and that's the thing. Like I don't mean to be like Debbie Downer, but the you have to pay the sacrifice. Like you have to like do that, and it's sad. I have some friends that don't hang out with me anymore because they're like, you never have time for us. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like I need to
Well,
keep my job.
you know, the true friends don't go away. I have
That's
a
true. That's
friend
true.
I
That's
have a
true.
friend that I didn't talk to for almost 10 years, and now I live a few miles away from him. And we still only talk like once a month, but we picked right back up where we left off because the friendship was pretty good. But to add on to what you were talking about with being a dad, um, my son, it will be 2 years old next month. While I didn't have the same problems beginning to code, and that did allow me to do the 120-hour weeks.
Yeah.
Um, Now I do exactly what you talk about. Well, you talked about either one live stream or two live streams ago. I think it was two. Um, I go to bed early. I go to bed at like 9 p.m. on average, and I'll get up at 3 a.m. or 3:30,
Jesus Christ.
and that'll be my code time. I it it's hard at first, but it gets easy, and it's a lot easier to wake up and then get yourself moving with a cup of coffee, or you know I don't know, walk around for 10 minutes or something and get your blood flowing. And then you can start concentrating. Then, if you're worn out from your job and then dealing with the kids, and then your wife's mad at you, and then you had to cut the grass, blah, 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 on and on. And then by 10 p.m., you're like, okay, let me sit down to learn something entirely new that's going to take 100% of my brain power. That just doesn't work
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
you're a very special kind of person. And even in my case, where I did that, minus the kids, uh, that's not sustainable. I was just bound to burn out if I didn't get a job. I don't know if it would have lasted 6 months, a year. I mean, well, I did last a year because I kept it going, but that was very hard, and it was a huge strain on my family.
Yeah. That
So,
that yeah. That's another thing. Like if you have a family, like you need to have a supportive spouse that understands that the things you're trying to do is to better your career, to better your life, whatever your situation is, and you kind of have to work together as a team where you're able to find time to do the things you have to do. Speaking of which, that's a different one. I hit the wrong button, but where's it? Congratulations on your son, by the way. 11 month, yeah, you don't have any time when you have an 11-month-old. But you had a good question here. What are your thoughts on phone app Mimo? Is it worth using to learn to code or to go to a place like W3 Schools Online? What I would say first is that whatever you decide to use to learn as a resource, just keep it consistent, and just go through a complete course all the way till the end. Like I share my courses on Udemy, and I have like 500 courses, which is $1 bajillion basically, and none of them are like finished all the way through. Maybe like 10 out of 500. And so what I tell people now is just make sure you have one like resource that you go from start to finish, because at the end of the day you'll learn that pretty much every other course they cover the same topics, so you don't need to
yep.
jump around. Just pick something that works for you and stick to it. At least that's been like my new way of thinking. What do you recommend?
Well, personally, I found that phone apps don't work. I mean, it's just the physical amount of time typing to try to do things is a pain. Trying to see the code formatted properly is a pain. I'm just really not a fan of phone apps at all. Um, I do love structured learning, and I mentioned earlier the person I used. I loved his courses, and I loved the way he did things. But you're going to have to be on a computer for that. I mean,
Yeah,
in reality, like you're not going to get job ready using anything but a development environment
that you're going to be working in. Yeah.
that sort of mirrors what you're going to do at work. Uh, there's just no way around it. I mean, you just kind of got to put in the time somehow.
Yeah, then that's the thing. It's putting in the time. Like I'll give you an example. I used to be in MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was like the best hobby to have. If anybody who's looking for a good hobby, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is definitely up there. But I gave all that stuff up because like I used to train every day. But even if I would cut out my training down to 3 times a week, that's like 3 hours out of my day. That's 9 hours that I could be studying or doing something else. And then you just have to make sacrifices. Here's a Question. Hi all. Could you please advise me what's a good way to start with programming as a telecom design engineer working with ISP now? Thanks. I'm not familiar with anything telecom related, but do you have a suggestion to this fine gentleman?
I do not know what a telecom design engineer is. Maybe he
Yeah,
could put that a
for
very brief description in the chat. Maybe.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Because
Um,
without yeah, without knowing
hmm.
what it is, I would say like look and see if there's related fields of telecom and some sort of like programming thing. I don't know. I'm just kind of saying in general like that overlaps and start there. So that way you're bringing something that you already know and you're implementing it via programming. I just don't know what that might be. Um,
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I don't even know if Verizon still does their own stuff, like has developers for that for the website. They probably just sub it out to an agency for cost savings. Comcast probably does the same thing. So
yeah,
I mean, he's probably in the same boat as everybody else, just starting out fresh, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah,
And also, saw somebody mention they try to do. Oh, Lux Groove mentioned he tries to do at least 4 hours a day studying.
yeah.
4 hours a day is pretty solid. You could probably get somewhere in about 6 months with that
Oh
if you
yeah,
have
yeah. That's
very,
amazing.
very focused learning. But
Yeah.
if you have to supplement that with full weekends, I mean, there is a point where you have to spend more than 4 hours at a time to figure out problems.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
That's
mean,
true.
so it's going to happen. And you have to be ready to sacrifice a weekend or two.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Cody Snyder asked, do they ask whiteboard questions for front end jobs? It depends where you go. And my experience has been I go to an interview, they ask me whiteboarding questions, I fail. So then I take them for their time, and then I go somewhere else. And then I'm more like the interviews where they ask you to build something and they give you like 2 hours or take home thing. And so the truth is, there's many places that still do a lot of whiteboarding, and then there's places where they will do like a verbal interview and then give you some assignment to complete, and those are the ones that I excel at. What's your experience been when you were interviewing?
I've never whiteboarded.
My God.
Um, every company I've gone to favored face to face chats over whiteboarding. I did the farthest I've gone. I've actually never been asked to do a code completion or fix this code either. So
Yeah.
somehow, and I didn't seek those out. It just happened like that. So, but then again, I've only interviewed with 6 companies total.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
But
but
that's
in
a
fairness, like one company, I took my own code to and showed them.
yeah, I think that's important when you have a portfolio and use that as a sales point where you could show the code, talk about what you've done, because it does show that you're knowledgeable in the thing that you're doing.
Oh
Um,
well, yes, I always did have a portfolio too with projects.
Yeah, so let me
So,
ask you a question since you're talking about portfolios, because
mhm.
I also get a lot of questions with that. And did you build your portfolio site from scratch, or did you have a portfolio site that you set up and you just linked to your projects from it, if that makes sense?
Oh, it absolutely does because this is a very hot topic. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I've heard a lot of people talking about it and arguing for
Yeah, I'll tell
months
you
over
my
this.
thoughts afterwards.
I already know your thoughts. So,
Watch too
and
many of my videos, bro. How
yeah,
do
I
you
know.
find
I
time?
mean,
How do you find time?
yeah. Uh, so, so anyway, I agree with you completely. It, and Coding Phase said it best. I got to credit him for it because, his hammer and nail thing is dead on, and then his use a template for your portfolio is dead on. The the portfolio, actually, the site that hosts your portfolio itself is like a suit and tie.
Right.
Like you put on the suit and tie for the interview. You don't go in the corner to your sewing machine and make a suit. You don't sew a suit before an interview. So why are you going to worry about making something that looks absolutely perfect that will draw somebody's attention, just go get a template off of wherever and put your, whatever projects you have in them, Next.js, whatever, and show those off in there with clickable links to a working project that looks good and has full functionality. Don't ever have anything broken. Just take it out of the portfolio. Having a bad portfolio is worse than not having one at all. So, and going back to the last round of interviews I did, we had two candidates. One was way stronger than the one we hired, and he had a link to a portfolio. Well, his portfolio was hosted on Heroku. It took a minute to load, or a minute and 15 seconds or something.
Jesus.
And then when it loaded, it looked like it was straight from the 90s. Like it was like that Space Jam website or something.
Nice.
Like
nice.
you remember
He's
that
got
infamous
taste. He's got
2001?
taste. Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows what's up.
It was so bad. I was like, look, we can't choose this guy. I was like, he takes no pride in what he does. So that, don't have something bad. Have it look modern. Take pride in what you do. If he did a template from ThemeForest and just showed me his projects inside of that, I would have never looked hard enough to know the difference. I wouldn't have cared. I'd be like, oh, this looks good.
No. I'm going to give you two examples because, like, I used to have my own martial arts school, and part of it is selling memberships. And I'm pretty good at talking, as you could tell, because I have like 20 years of doing it. And so it got to a point where I didn't care how I looked, and I could sell my way to anything. And then one day this woman comes with her son, and I look a mess. I'm not shaven. I didn't sleep good. It's like when I was younger, I probably that time like had a wild night before. And so she comes in, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this sale. And I'm like, I'm like, oh, so good at talking. I can't even explain how good I am at talking. I couldn't even open my mouth fast enough. She just come in, looked at me, and left. Even though where I used to have the school, we were the top school. Everybody was like, oh, this guy does some miracles with your children, like whatever, like amazing guy. And I didn't even she just walked in, looked at me, and walked out. And here's the thing, like when you're building up a portfolio, I was thinking about it because I'm like, I need to come up with a good answer. If you're just starting out, first of all, you're still learning. And through learning, you're going to make mistakes. And so your first portfolio that you build to be your project website that's supposed to be your suit and tie to present to the world is not going to be perfect because you're a new developer. It's going to have mistakes, and it's just going to create a lot of stress in your life. And so like I kind of wanted to find like a website that I did a long time ago and that's super bad. And I remember I deleted all of the bad projects that I didn't delete them, I hide them. But here's a website something that a new person would make, like, right? Like you could make this, like I could make this, you could make this. Let me share my screen here. I could make this like a portfolio, and it's like, oh, it's like a simple, you have your area for your portfolio projects. It kind of does something. And this exactly shows like, this is your first website that you built. Like I could see it, it's simple. And when someone, and imagine like the links didn't work or whatever, versus something like this. Like let's compare here. You have your resume, you have your portfolio section. So what I would say, exactly like what you said, is that this would be my portfolio, my front-facing, professionally looking website that I did not make. It's a Bootstrap theme from Bootstrap Made, and this looks professional. And that crappy website that I made, and when we're starting out, we are going to have projects like that. But that's going to be something in my portfolio section. And imagine that crappy website was the only thing I had. As you build better projects, replace your worst projects with your better ones in this, in your portfolio like website. So the point is, it's like you need to understand that part of getting a job, it's not doing everything yourself, but it's being able to sell yourself as being some sort of expert, or at least show them your competency that you know what you're doing. So by having a theme that I used versus my website that maybe has issues, maybe doesn't look that cool, just shows that I'm not willing to put the best foot forward in terms of presentation. And people care about that stuff, you know what I mean? So Yeah, that's
They
all
do,
I
especially
once.
when a lot of people, depending on the organization, the bigger the organization, the less technical the person looking at it.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And a lot of times that people like look at your stuff initially, that look at your portfolio, like they're hiring managers. They just want to quickly get a feel for what you could offer. And if they look at something that in 3 seconds turns them off, they're not going to look at the rest. And you could have like
Yep.
the next Google in your portfolio. So Lux here, I'm a year and a half into learning web dev. I know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React. How do you know when you're ready to apply to jobs? I would say if you know and somewhat competent in the things you mentioned, you're ready to get hired. And I would just say work on getting a template and build one, like 2 to 3 projects that showcase, what you know, and you'll be good to go. At least that's
Yep.
my opinion.
Absolutely. Yep. Not much more to say there. If you can build a website with, functionality that works, then, you're good enough to maintain somebody else's code that they ran away from.
Here's another good one. Hi, everyone, from Jose. Did you have a list of goals that you want to accomplish every day or every week? I'm going to start with you, and then I'll give my 2 cents on the topic because I'm not as disciplined as you are. I know that for a fact. So, I have a
Well,
different
I
answer.
I no longer write down a list of goals. I have stuff in my head now, so I guess it sort of is a goal list, but it's not exactly. It can change at any time. When I first started, I didn't really set in with a specific set of goals other than I'm going to follow this path which was laid out, make a website work in HTML and CSS, make it look exactly like the example, then add functionality to buttons, then do APIs and stuff. Like in that fact, yes, that's a set of goals you're working through. No matter what goals you set, as long as you stick to them, you're going to accomplish something. But I don't know if you have to go super hardcore into saying, "Oh, I'm going to learn Flexbox this week. I'm going to learn uh, Grid next week."
Yeah.
Like, I mean, those are great, but you don't need to get. I don't think you need to get that hardcore. I think you can learn things as you discover them naturally.
Yeah.
Through a tutorial or whatever else. You can do a dive into that and make a goal from that point. But
Yep.
otherwise, you'll end up with like 200 plus Udemy courses in your cart.
Listen, listen. No, yeah, I just love buying courses. Like it's like an impulse. I get the phone on my ding. This new instructor released the greatest thing. I'm like, I'm buying 2 of them. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't want to do the math on the money I spent because I probably could have afforded like some sort of boot camp. But um, I was looking here. Let's see here. Let's see. There's something interesting somewhere. Somebody asked. There's a lot of good comments and questions. I'm just looking to see which one. Oh yeah, we talk about goals. Here's the thing I was gonna say about goals. So
Mhm.
I'm so bad on having direction, and I read this book, and there was this guy talking about this idea of like cornerstone habits, and there's this woman who had a lot of bad habits, and she also was a smoker. And what they found out when she committed to just stopping to smoke, she improved in other areas in her life. Like she started to exercise more, she started to eat better, even though that was not her goal. So I kind of take the similar approach to web development is that I have one project that I want to build, and that's kind of like my cornerstone project. And everything that I do towards that project. So I don't try to get sidetracked by learning something that's irrelevant to me finishing that project. And that's how I do it. So, and if you're a beginner, your goal should be build the first HTML and CSS static website. And if that's your goal, learn everything you need to get that goal done. And that, in a nutshell, is kind of like what I've been doing because I'm really bad at setting goals. Ask my first ex-wife. She'll tell you all about it. Yeah, here's good comment. I pursue coding like a workout. Start small, then see how far you can push yourself to work longer. Super important in your mental state to know what you can learn, new things, and succeed. 100%. 100%. Look, another great question. How much do you actually need to know for your first job? Seems like companies are asking for a lot. Yeah, all those companies, remember, when you're getting hired, you're not getting hired by developers. You're getting hired by hiring managers that just randomly make stuff up, put in a description, and then say you need to have 5 years of experience because they don't know like what they even want. And the point is, it's like you just gotta have a portfolio and be able to talk about it when you show up at the interview and sell yourself. Like they'll be like, "Oh, you don't know this." I'm like, "Well, I'm willing to learn it." And you talk about, "But this is what I did," and you kind of have to kind of sell yourself. But nobody will ever meet the job description that they're going for. You know what I mean? Because everybody goes to try to get that next job that's like one level up or two levels up. So they're always, underprepared. Because if you're like, I would argue that if you're ready at the level of what they're looking for, you shouldn't be applying to that job. You should be applying at something higher. You know what I mean? Because you're not going to learn anything from there if you could do everything. So, just going through the comments, there was a lot of comments. Look at that. It's good to have you here because you give some good advice. Such great advice from both of you. Really like the strategy emphasis on how quickly you could learn. You know, um, I got to go to bed at 3 and wake up at 9:30. My sleep schedule is jacked up. Sleep is overrated. No one needs sleep. I mean, who needs sleep? So, yeah, anything that you would add that like I missed or other like tips that someone should be aware of or something someone could benefit from like on their journey to, you know, making the transition to a new job or just working somewhere?
I think what you mentioned about, taking the job requirements with a grain of salt is important. And if you think you should go for something, just go for it and see where you land. You can never really get too much interview practice anyway.
Yeah.
And I would probably be more weary of the jobs that are vague versus ones that ask for too much.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's pretty important. And then people just need to stay focused on what they need to learn. I mean, nobody really cares if you know 30 different things if you don't know any of them well. So keep things, on the keep a narrow path of learning.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
jump like if you're going to learn React,
100%.
don't try to jump into React Native. It's not the same thing. It's too different. It'll steer you a little too far off course, especially if you're a beginner.
Yeah.
It's if you're gonna jump into server side rendered React, which I don't even think people really need to do if they're a beginner. I think they can stick with create React app and do single
Yeah.
page applications fine, and you'll be fine for a job. Um, don't worry about uh, learning Next.js. Don't worry about
Or
Gatsby.
Gatsby. Yeah.
Actually, I would recommend staying away from Gatsby completely
Yep. Yep. I came
until
to that
you're more
conclusion
advanced.
also. Yeah, I came to the conclusion as well. Um,
Yeah,
I
it's
would
super
say
awesome when. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say Gatsby. I did my first Gatsby site like I think 6 months after I started programming, something like that, maybe 7 months. And I was like, oh, this is so easy. I did their tutorial on the documentation, which
Yeah.
at the time was awesome because
Yeah.
there were no other tutorials out.
Right.
And and then I went into their, I think they call it showcase or something on their website, where they have like you can just do like download this full application and it just runs and it's good.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
downloaded this like full blog with contentful API integration and
Yep.
stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is so easy. And the first time I had to write something in Node like that was custom, it was like it was
Yeah.
like when I'm jumping on a trampoline and I miss the trampoline and just
Yeah.
go like
Yep.
flat.
Yep. Yep.
It was just a hard roadblock. And I was like, you know what? I was like, this isn't for me. I was like, I see exactly what other people are talking about when this is a pain.
Yep.
And and I kind of left that alone and went back to my regular course of learning, which I should have done all along. And then when I discovered Next.js, I was like, oh, well, I can understand everything I need to do in this and do custom stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so I really, if you are going to do something server side, Next.js I think is a way to go.
I think like if you don't know what problem Next.js solves, then you don't need to learn it yet. But I
Yeah.
was talking to my friend because I love Next.js, and I kind of posed him a question: why wouldn't you make everything Next.js? It's React basically, just server side rendered. And but this is what he said. He said Google React jobs versus Next.js or Gatsby jobs, and then you see that there's still way more React jobs, and React is the foundation for all those other things like Gatsby and Next.js. So if you know React like really well, learning Gatsby is easy. But if you go and start learning Gatsby, then it's hard because you don't have the foundation that you need to like make sense of it. You
Yeah.
know,
What a
so
lot of people don't see with the React jobs too is the amount of those jobs that have integrated React with something like Django or
yeah,
Flask
yeah,
or something super obscure like something we have at my job, which is in Perl.
yeah.
So
It's
Perl
insane.
has web applications also, just like Django.
Yeah,
So you can integrate it with anything. You can integrate React front end with C++, framework.
yep.
It's so that's when you're seeing 2000 React jobs, you gotta be aware and maybe even ask a question during the interview. They're going to expect you to.
Right. That's
And
good.
it's a two-way street when you're talking to an interviewer. You're it's not like jobs are this like glorious heavenly thing that's bestowed upon us and we're like so honored that they're giving us a job. Like
Yeah.
it's a value exchange.
Yep.
They are paying us the amount of value they think will provide.
Yeah.
We they need to they need to provide me a value too.
Right. Right.
So it needs to be a two-way street. So you should always, well, everybody should always make sure that you're asking questions and making sure it's a right fit for you.
Yeah. 100%. This brings us to actually someone had a birthday yesterday. Happy birthday! And they also have a question. I'm turning 41 July 1st. Everybody remember that date. We're gonna do special life. No, I'm just kidding. Send me presents in the form of chocolates. Um, Here he has a question. What are the two projects that are must for a front end job?
Is he
Hmm.
talking beginner or
Yeah, let's say beginner, like to get hired as your first dev job. It's everything we're doing in our community project thing. I'm just gonna say that, throw that out there. But but what in your opinion, what do you need to know? And we touched a little bit through our conversation here today.
oh
But
yeah,
if you were
we've
to
been
sum
talking
it
about
up,
it the whole time.
yeah,
Oh
what you were
well,
to sum it up.
yeah, exactly what you said. I mean, you got the create a website, have it connect to an API, return some data. Um, I would probably leave that one alone at that point,
Yep.
and then maybe create a different application that goes a little further because you've already
Yes.
learned the API stuff.
Get some
So have
crud.
it do that. Yeah, and has some authentication in it. It can
Yes.
be as
Yes.
simple. A lot of people don't really realize it, but you don't have to roll your own authentication.
No.
Nobody
No.
nobody really does that. Like th- what people don't talk about is nobody in their right mind as an organization their own authentication and have the liability be on money to somebody else to
Yeah.
offload liability so they don't get sued.
Yeah.
So so always keep that in mind. So with that in mind, when right before I went for the NASA job, one of the applications I created was just a simple CRUD app, which looked pretty good, but it was uh, a movie search app. So I connected to a bunch of free movie APIs and then had authentication through Google. So it was basically just, all they saw was a login button and it would reroute you to Google login. And then it would, be all logged in. And I would save all their information. They had a user dashboard and They could see the movies they saved, ratings. They could rate
Yep.
stuff. It's all basic stuff, but that's going to be plenty to get you really I would say, into intermediate territory.
Yeah.
If you can
Yeah.
make it all work well.
Right. Right. Luke jumped in a little late. Can't wait to go back and listen to
Oh
all
yeah.
this. Yeah, a lot of good stuff here. And Corey's getting a lot of birthday wishes. Let's see here. Yeah, that is a basic project. Find public API to showcase data on the web page. That would be like the next step. Once you build an HTML website, added the little JavaScript functionality, like like a image slide or whatever. The next step is to be able to pull some data from API and be able to showcase it. And um, Corey has a good point here. Isn't that kind of full stack here? Well, it's full stacky if you're actually building the API yourself, right? If you're going to an API that somebody else has built, you still get the data. But as a front-end developer, you do need to know how to interact with the API, how to, get the data, how to, because the front end is what displays the data. You have to be able to pull that data from the API and be able to render it to the page. So that's still very important. And for everything that we're doing in the projects that we're not doing anything back-end related until you guys get your first job. We're just working on front-end projects. And the farthest we're going to do to go to a back-end is to use Strappy to set up like a CMS for our front-end stuff. But, I think full stack development, it's very difficult, especially if you come from JavaScript route. Like, I would say if you're doing full stack, and it's very easy to say if you're doing, let's say, ASP.NET and C#, because everything is server like rendered on the server, everything that they do, the way their infrastructure, their MVC, their Razor pages, you're starting in full stack, but everything is so integrated together that's why it's not a problem. But if you're in JavaScript world and you're trying to learn React and trying to be a backend developer, that's very difficult. There's way too much stuff to learn.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I wouldn't consider just connecting to APIs full stack, but that's that's kind of the sort of the problem of the terminology and how it's not standardized in the industry. Um, so I totally agree with you. Like once we're creating controllers and actions based off of the API call
Yeah.
and all that, like Django or C sharp, or creating the API in like Golang or Node.js even. Like when you're doing that, you're doing full stack.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, Node.js is a lot harder for a complex API than many other languages.
Yeah. Yeah. That's part of the
So
reasons I started using C sharp.
I wouldn't recommend going for like full stack Node.js
The
at first. Get
the
something else
issue
under your belt first.
Yeah, the issue I have with Node, and I love Node, I love JavaScript in general, is that you could build things the way you want, and there's not really like any real standard. Where like a C sharp API, there's like one way to do it. It's like very standardized, and I think like I like that most. Even though like I still am a JavaScript guy, and I one day want to be able to create APIs with Node. Uh, but for now, I don't spend too much time on it. Look, we got Marcus Sire says Joe has mentioned DJ Norris a lot. Finally got to meet him, sort of in the flesh. Yeah, so yeah, no, that's awesome. Joe, that's the guy from Coding Face. If you guys wondering who Joe is, Coding Face is awesome. Like some people like don't like him like because they think he's rough around the edges, whatever. But the
Mhm.
guy's an entrepreneur. The guy's very smart, and he knows what's up, how to, you know, like get the bag, like he likes to say. But or whatever he says, I'm not as cool as he is, so I don't know the terminology. But the point is, like the guy knows how to make money. He understands the whole picture of what it takes to become a web developer, and he gives people really good advice in terms of getting hired. So, yeah, it's a lot of times people just like the hardest part about web development is that it's such a wide field that if you try to do everything, you'll never get anywhere. You do have to just do less, and that will give you more on your return, as weirdly as that sounds. Yep. Today's my birthday. Well, happy birthday, Ken. Everybody's got birthdays. Let's see. Is server-side rendering using traditional tools such as Django with templates considered full stack in your opinions? That's a good question. I'll let you give an answer first because I'm not going to learn Django ever. So I don't have a say in this
I
conversation.
actually I use Flask instead because I hate Django. I hate
There you go.
ORMs. Yep, I like making queries directly to the database. I don't need abstraction layers, or at least I don't like them.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, yes, because there's hundreds, I don't know, there's probably thousands of organizations where you get hired into them and they're using Django, and you're doing front end. You're not touching the controllers. You're not making the models. You're not doing any of that stuff. All you're doing is the front end pieces, and you're telling somebody else, create this model. I need this action once this API returns, the user's, I don't know, whatever movies that they ordered. Um, and then you're making a button display a certain color based on that. Like when you're touching the controllers and everything and the logic behind all that, uh, then that's full stack in my opinion.
Yeah. So I got a contract role where we're working with part of the backend is in Django, and so we have a dedicated Python guy who does all that stuff, and we just get the endpoints that we connect to. And they asked me if I'm willing to learn Python, and I was like, I wanted to lie and say yes, but then I realized lying is bad, and I told them no. And so they might have decreased my chances of working long term at the company, but at the same time, I have no desire to learn Django or Python. I just want to do React. But yeah, if you're doing the backend stuff, you're a backend guy. What's funny, the backend guy doesn't want to do anything with React. He makes it clear every day he talks to us. So,
Oh
it's a
yeah,
win-win.
true backend and database guys cannot stand HTML and CSS.
No, no,
And
no.
they
That's
remind me
beneath
of that
them.
on a regular basis. They said they tell me all the time I'm not into that pretty stuff.
Yeah, I passed this comment. I didn't see it, but the guy who wanted advice, design internet connectivity, and then when I can't say W, so that's how I'm gonna pronounce it. Man, that description, like, over my head. Um, like, I wish we had some good advice to give, but I think like what
Hmm.
you said, it's kind of, you might just have to start where everybody else starts, from the basics. Pick a
Yeah,
stack that you want to
probably.
learn. Yeah,
It sounds like telecom system architecture or something.
yeah, that's like, man,
Yeah, I'm just guessing on that though. Not
yeah.
not an expert on everything.
Here's a good question. Any advice on networking with other developers and recruiters? What are your thoughts on that?
Uh yeah, this is a kind of a sour subject for me because I don't really like recruiters too much.
Yeah,
Uh I get a few dozen messages a week. I mean, people just spam me to no end.
yeah, yeah.
And they don't care about me as an individual or what I'm
Nope.
doing. I get the same generic message all the time.
Yeah,
So I would say I would say you would need to start reaching out to recruiters on LinkedIn, maybe even Clubhouse. Uh, there's a lot of them on there, and start getting personal with them. The more personal relationships you get, it opens up doors. There's no way around that.
yeah.
It is hard. I'm not saying it's easy at all. Uh, what was the other part of his question?
Um,
I lost it in chat.
any advice on
Oh,
networking with
on
other developers
networking.
and recruiters?
Yeah, networking's been hard in the last year, but at the same
Yeah,
time, it's that also kind of opened doors because Meetup and all that, like all the stuff that people used to go to that was like local, nobody would go to a meetup that's more than like an hour away.
yeah.
Um, Now, like you have
Online.
access
Yeah, boom.
nationwide.
Yeah,
Like
it's
you,
amazing.
yeah. So you can really start networking with anybody. Just go join a bunch of meetups and start talking to people and start messaging them or whatever. The worst that happens is you get ignored. Just don't
Yeah,
be too spammy. Try to be personal.
yeah. I'm gonna give you like three stories that played out in my favor. And I always believe in networking because I used to be in sales, and a lot of it, like when I had a successful martial art business, majority, like 80% of my clients were by referral. It's someone that knew me referred them to me. Like and that's the best type of referrals because you don't have to go out of your way to build trust. Because if I like you and I say this guy's a good guy, a perfect fit for your company, and the boss likes you, he'll be like, well, if Paul likes him, then I like him. You know what I mean? And that's unfortunately how it works. And so the three stories I was going to tell you, the first one is um, I when I was learning to code, I was really into WordPress. I was doing a lot of WordPress templates and stuff like that. And I would tell everybody that I do WordPress and websites. And this was like 4 years ago. This guy comes up to me that now I've been friends for a while. And he goes, Paul, like you do websites. I'm working on this project. I know you can't help me. He literally said that. I was like, oh man, like I was kind of thirsty. And then he goes, but do you know anybody who could help me? Do you know a React developer? I'm like, actually, I do. And I hooked him up with a React developer who still working for this guy. He's been working there for like 3 years now. They're working on a huge project. In this meantime, I've been learning React. And the other day, my friend that I referred to this guy who was hiring calls me. He's like, Paul, remember David, the guy you referred me to? He needs extra help, and he was wondering if you want to come on and do some React role, like project work. And I'm like, yeah. So the guy that did not hire me 3 years ago, the fact that I talked to him and helped him connect with somebody else, I was the person like in his mind, to be the next person, at least for their junior stuff they're doing. And so if I didn't say anything, if I didn't go out of the way to make that connection, this opportunity would never arise. You know what I mean? It's another, like, that's the truth. Also, like, my first job that I got as a developer in Texas is because somebody else basically handed my resume to the owner, and that's how I got invited. And if I didn't make connection with that person that knew the owner, that would never happen. And then the one time where I got turned down, this was funny because I knew I was going to get turned down. I applied to IBM like 3 months ago, a position that I'm definitely qualified for. But I wrote a resume, and if your resume is not hitting all the proper keywords, not written in a specific certain way, a company like IBM has so many like applicants that they just run it through the automatic reader. And my application was just never picked up. And they literally set an automatic thing where it's like, oh, I'm sorry, but you didn't make the cut because our system didn't like your resume. And I called my friend who works in IBM. I'm like, bro, I tried applying. I don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, I know what's going on. My resume wasn't written in the format that their auto detection liked. This is what he said to me. He's like, Paul, why didn't you call me? I would have hand delivered your resume to the person that would at least give you an interview 100%. And that's the power of networking. That's the power you get by making and building these relationships. And a lot of people will say it's unfair. Yes, it is unfair. And that's why we tell you, though, you got to do the work, not just like, knowing to code, it's like 30%. And then making yourself like hireable and being able to make these connections will take you the rest of the way. And, it is a lot about who you know sometimes, So that was a long story. Damn.
Yep, absolutely. It's important to get yourself out there.
Yeah, I also want to be mindful of your time. I know we've been going for a while. How you feeling?
Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah, we could do like another like 20 minutes or so, or 15 minutes. So if you guys have any rapid questions, about anything, actually, yeah, let's see who could ask the most ridiculous questions related to web development. And by the way, if you see any comments that you want to hit up, just shout them out. You know,
Oh well, Corey Snyder just asked. Seems like getting a junior dev job would definitely cut my salary, maybe significantly.
yeah,
Yep. How
yeah.
long
And
does it take to get promotions, raises, etc.? So
um,
I'll touch
go
on the
ahead.
first one.
And I have a lot of experience with this part as well. So
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. So my salary cut by 20,000 a year when I took my first job. I know yours was pretty bad, a
Yeah,
lot
it
worse than
was.
mine.
Yeah, it was. It was terrible, terrible, terrible. It was cut by like 45,000. That's
Yeah, that's
45,000. That's I went from having a comfortable life, and the only reason I was able to do this, Corey, this is not like fair for you. So because you have a family, you guys live together. You gotta understand. I went through a divorce, and so for me, and my daughter's 22 now. So for me, cutting down my expenses, what like I live in the smallest apartment. I eat like rice and beans, but that's not realistic for people who live with a family. So I totally understand that. But what I'm saying is that that's the hardest choice to make is like is work taking that pay cut worth it? At sometimes, I'll be honest with you, it isn't. You know what I mean? Just because I don't want anybody to ruin their livelihood by trying to take a chance, and that's why a lot of times you kind of have to, hedge your bets by continue doing your work, and keep building your project. But yeah, like it still will hurt for sure if you have a really nice job. But for the second part of it, how long does it take to kind of get your income up? Like you're more in like up for this question because I'm still in the process of getting my next raise, so or quitting my company and going somewhere else. But how long does
well,
it
yeah,
take to
that
get promoted?
that all comes back to, backing up what you can do.
Yeah,
So really, there's not much of a way around it. Companies, your biggest increase will be moving companies.
yes,
Nobody wants to give anybody a raise.
yep,
So when I first took my job, I took enough of a cut that I was like, I can't sustain this for more than like a year.
yeah,
So I decided, at a year, I need to make more money, whether it was with this company or not. The timing kind of just worked out perfectly for where I'm at now. But uh, I went ahead and started putting in a few job applications. I saw this one. I was like, oh, I definitely got to put this one in. And this one doubled my pay.
wow,
So yeah, but it comes down to backing yourself up,
yeah,
right? I can get in front of a group of people in a business situation and I turn into a different person.
yeah,
And that's just a trait I have, and it works out in my favor. A lot of people aren't like that. But even if you make two or three hops, like you can expect like 15 to 30,000 dollars raises each jump you make, as long as your skills are improving with that.
right.
So even if you do take I mean, I guess $13 an hour is kind of low for today's. Let's say you took something
Listen,
for four.
listen, listen. Not saying anything, but I'm just saying. I worked for
it,
that's. I'm just gonna say my supermarket paid the same as my first dev job, and I'm not gonna
okay,
say if you're
so
right or wrong, but that's I'm desperate. You know what I mean? Don't be desperate like me, guys.
yeah, so if your first job is like 35,000 a year or something,
That's not $13 an
um,
hour. I'm just doing the math for you there, just in case if you're wondering.
thanks.
I'm
So
just kidding. I'm kidding.
if you start at 35,000, I would say, keep pushing yourself like you're learning and you don't even have a job, and use them as experience. And maybe 6 months down the road, hopefully you have savings beforehand for that cut
Yes,
you're
hundred
taking.
percent.
Yeah. And then like 6 months down the road, I would say start just putting resumes out everywhere and get that 15 to 30,000 dollar jump, hopefully 30, and then keep the same pace going with your learning. So by a year, you're 80 to 90 grand and you're in a good spot. And then maybe you can scale back your, all out learning assault you're doing into just, yeah, I'm learning a couple hours a night and on the weekends, or maybe every other day. Like, just in this situation, have a plan in place if you're going to take a cut up front.
Yeah, so what I would say is that for me, like I said, I was not married. My daughter's old enough. I didn't have responsibility. So taking a pay cut made sense. It doesn't make sense for everybody. So definitely, be smart about it and have a savings if you're making a transition. But with that being said, I'm just gonna say this: if I had to like think about everything I learned from like age of 35 to 39 coding, I learned more in the first 4 months of working. So to put that in perspective, it's when you get your full-time job, it might not pay you as much, but the experience that you gain is going to be so much more than any experience you had being self-taught learner on your own. And that experience is what's going to propel you to your next role, where you're going to get, $30,000 to $40,000 more. It's just, paying the price your first job. It's like you got to go through the dirt, and that's just the way it is. But so got to do it for the experience if it's not the pay. So, yeah. So everybody watching, by the way, I just want to say thanks, guys, for tuning in. I always appreciate it. I just like to say these things at random times because the truth is, I'm some random guy on the internet. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you guys are the ones that come, watch the show, give your supports, participate in the comments. So without you, this channel would not exist, and I'm just glad to be able to help you give my feedback and opinion of struggling through learning to code and having guests like today to be able to give you more kind of things that you could think about and be like, oh, okay, this is what I have to do to get a job. So, thanks for that. Just trying to like think what's like. Yeah, we had a lot of good questions. Basically, got to do the work. Learning never stops. What would you say people shouldn't do when learning to code? Like what things they should avoid learning or avoid doing?
Man, that's a very,
That's a
I
heavy
hate to say it, but
question.
that's a very broad question.
I know it is, but I feel
So
like if I
there's
if I don't ask it, people will do all those things.
well, I would probably just go ahead and avoid. Let's say you're going for web development and not
Avoid
a
Django.
back. Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but yeah, let's say you're going for web development and not back end roles or database roles or something. I would focus on web development. To do apps and JavaScript calculators are not web development.
No.
Ignore whatever uh, tutorials cover that. Ignore the people that say to put that in your portfolio. You're going for making websites and web based applications for people to use. And to do apps are don't really show what a user would do on a regular basis. Yes, in some ways it kinda does roughly, but not enough to where companies care about it. So just skip that stuff. I would say not don't look at don't worry about reading about and looking for the latest and greatest. Just it's when you pick something, whether it's well, I guess we'll just stick with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like stick with just learning how to make websites with that
Yeah.
and just stick to it. Just don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about Angular versus React at first. And when it is that time, pick one and don't look back. Just stick with a certain path and don't veer from it, and you'll make the most progress. And I would say don't really try to go full stack if you're just beginning, unless it's like you see yourself needing it for your job once you're already in a job. That's really kind of the time to pick it up because you're just spreading yourself too thin at that point. There's always more front end that you can get better with. You don't need
Yeah.
to try to figure out how to
Everything.
make an API or put together, do Django's ORM, which is horrendous, or you know, uh, create a database with an Nginx server. Like you don't need to be figuring that out. It's not important
Yeah.
at this point. So yeah, that kind of just encompasses, staying focused into one targeted area.
Yeah, yeah, true. And I'm going to tell you another thing that you guys shouldn't do that I was so happy because I was totally not gonna do that. And then the day before interview, I had time. I was like, let me do this one thing. So I go to an interview, and this guy's interviewing a bunch of people on the same day, and the owner of the company is the one that's doing the interview. He gets up, like the interviewer is talking, trying to say the thing, and the guy just looks at him and goes like, "You know nothing about what we do here at our company." And he looks at the guy, and and I'm like next to be interviewed, and I hear this. And he goes like, "You could not take a moment out of your busy life to go on our website to the company that you're interviewing and see what we're about? Do you even know what we're building?" It's like, "Do you even know what we do here?" And I almost passed out in the other room listening to this. I'm like, I'm in trouble. But luckily, I was able, like, went on the website, learned everything they did, and I knew the girl who worked at the company, so she told me. So when I came in, the guy totally tried to call me out. Also, it's like, "You don't know what we do," and I literally went, "You're working on a React application for a HR like base like whatever," and I just went to the spiel, and then he just sat down. It's like, "All right, we could start this interview." And I was like, my God. So when people give you their time, you have to be respectful, or people give you your time, or their time, I guess. Yeah. You got to be respectful of theirs. And so prepare. You don't have to be an expert, but do some basic research, show the common decency. It's, you know,
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've done that for every company, even before I put in an application, just to see if
yeah.
it's their culture is something I would like, just
Yeah.
from what I could tell. And that was kind of something when I did this last round of interviews. Uh, well, and the ones before that, not a single applicant did that, and it kind of irked me a little bit. Like, how can you be passionate about what we do when you don't know what we do?
Right. Yeah. That.
But I held my tongue on that because in the end, they just need to do the job. But yeah, everybody just needs to do a little bit of
A
research.
little bit, not asking for much.
Yeah,
Just be,
5-10 minutes at the
yeah,
most. I
that
mean,
go, yeah.
if well, I mean at the least, really. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, look at their website, look at their about us page or something, so you can just regurgitate something and quiet the
yeah,
guy who's mad at everybody.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. Um, like in any of your roles, have you ever had like or worked with someone who is like an elitist programmer who's been very toxic to work with? I know that's common in certain places, especially with someone who's like super old school, like been programming forever, has like 20 degrees, you know.
Well, I wouldn't say I wouldn't really box them into that, but there's people that are hard to work with. Definitely, there's people that treat me like I don't know what I'm doing. Uh, when sometimes for the situation, I guess I can see where they're coming from because a lot of times when I ask them to do something, I don't know what I'm doing. And they can see that because they're the expert in what I'm asking them to change and I'm not.
Right.
But they are in charge of the product I'm asking them to change.
Yeah.
So, but when I do know what I'm talking about and the same person says, treats me like I'm an idiot, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
But really it nothing's been extreme, and that is probably because of the jobs I've taken. Like both of the companies I'm at have a lot of people, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Na- NASA has many organizations or many groups within the organization. They have a bunch of different areas across the country. The company I worked for before that, they did mostly cleared work. So people with security clearances for the government and stuff.
Yep.
So they had a bunch of people. And I worked outside of that because I didn't have a clearance. So I worked directly with the owner. And I only had contact with people as he would pull them from a project into whatever project I was working on
Yep.
for like a day to a week.
Oh wow.
So I had very limited uh, interaction with them at the first job. This job now is really where I deal with the same people all the time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I mean nothing really bothers me too much. I mean, coming from my old career with the, the HVAC and the control system stuff,
Yep.
those were some of the most toxic people I've met in my life.
Wow.
And a lot of times, you have to kind of turn into them to get on their level, basically,
Right.
to
Right.
work things out and to have a
Yeah.
working relationship.
Yeah. It's
So I
crazy.
can flip the switch where I need to, but I'm not saying that's a good thing to do.
Yeah. No, and that's a hard thing
But
to do for
it
a long
does,
time. Yeah.
yeah. What I did at the time served a purpose. So I guess if somebody has a toxic situation, you can do what you can to diffuse the situation or move on.
Right.
Chances
Right.
are that that toxic person has made themselves integral into the organization
Yeah. Yeah.
just by the nature of who they are. They're going to make themselves the irreplaceable person.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you have one of those, and they're a dick, that's just not a pleasant place to work. But at the same time, you're there for your thing and get that experience, and then move on and do what else you have to do.
Yep.
But
That's what it comes down to. You're not there to be friends. You're there to make money and get experience.
let's see here. Yep. So Tiv Jam likes the live. Well, thank you so much. We'll try our best here on our super unprofessional live stream that we got going on here. But I just, a lot of people ask me like, like, why do you do these live streams? Like nobody watches them. I'm like, the few people that do watch them, I appreciate it. But it's like, I do it for like, cause I want to know these things, you know what I mean? And like talk about it. And like, I want to, like, I love like learning like different paths, cause everybody has a different path. And what people have to understand, maybe what worked for you, what worked for me, maybe not work for them, but they're going to have their own thing that's going to like get them to where they need to go. And so it's, you just have to put in the work, and if you know what you're doing, you're going to get there. So, but
Yeah.
any,
Don't give
yeah,
up.
yeah, don't give up. I was going to say, because we're hitting a 2 hour mark, and I definitely don't want to keep you longer than that. But any parting wisdom that if someone were to do this one thing, that would help them tremendously?
Well, I guess I just blew that question, huh? Well, yeah. So, I mean, really, you have to have discipline to do what you don't want to do to
Yeah,
achieve your goal.
yeah,
I mean, that's really big, because motivation kind of ebbs and flows. But if you can get yourself into a groove and do what you don't want to do, but know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to make it. And that goes right into not giving up and persevering. When people tell you you're not good enough, like that's just that person's opinion.
yeah,
That's just, I mean, that's you never see what's on the other side of the interview table.
yeah,
Like there could be you could be the best candidate, like even if you think you failed. But then somebody's brother-in-law shows up and they're like, "Oh, we got to have this guy in." Or, somebody just pops out
yeah,
of nowhere and you guys are equal, but somebody likes the dude's haircut better than yours. I mean,
yeah,
it, you never know what it is.
yeah,
You can't personally say, "Oh, I'm not good enough because I didn't make it." Like just
yeah,
keep trying. You're going to make it
yeah,
eventually.
yeah. Because you don't know at the end of the day like what the reasoning behind it. It's most of the time it's you just gotta do a little bit more, do a little different, or just go to more interviews. Because I've like what people don't understand. Like I had more no's than yeses at my jobs, like in like interviews. Like I had like five I could count on my hand versus like 40, 50 that just didn't go my way. You just got to keep trying. One thing that I try to remind myself is that like cuz I'm more like cuz like I'm Russian people are very pessimistic, so we always think about the negative. It's in our nature. So I'm like, but why if I fail? Why if I can't do this? Why if this doesn't happen? Why if like, the world explodes? Like always, always, always. And that's such a bad attitude to have because it it's hard to stay motivated through all this. So like now I'm just like I'll have that thought process in my head, and then I'll say, but what if you do? It's like, but what if they say yes? So like I'll be like negative, 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 and then But what if they don't say that? And so you kind of have to, even if you don't see the light at the tunnel, you have to understand that it's a numbers game. Like, here, the one caveat I'm going to tell you, and this is the only way you're going to fail. The 100% guarantee that this is the way you're going to fail. If you talk about web development and you do zero work about it, then yeah, you're not going to get the job you want because you're not doing the work. Like, but if you're studying, you're putting actual effort. Like, here's like what I'm going to tell you. What I know from like 5 years ago to what I know now, I can't unlearn it. Like, it's in me, the stuff that I learned. So nobody could take away the things that you learn, your experience. And with every year, if you keep studying, you're just getting better as a programmer and developer, and eventually going to be good enough to get a job. But if you're not studying, you're not learning, you're not putting in the time, then yeah, it's impossible. But like, I can't unlearn coding. Like, I can't just forget React right now. So that's the beauty of like coding, is that once you know how to do it, it's not like you're building like on top of the things that you learn, and eventually you're going to get a job. Like, eventually you're going to be experienced enough to get that role. So yeah.
Do you mind if I field one more question, or did you want that to be the?
No, I don't care.
Okay,
Like, I mean, I
so
don't care. I care about that. If you find something cool to talk about, let's do it. Even if I don't have a heart. I'm more mindful of your time than my time.
okay, well, let's cut out right after this question then. So Tony asked, "What do you think of HTML emails?" I would say HTML emails, not just making them, but actually making them work across a variety of clients is extremely hard. Especially ones like, well, I don't know if he's in the US or not, but you can look up Home Depot examples. They have like animations and GIFs and stuff in there. That is extraordinarily hard. And when you're trying to parse 700 lines of table rows and cells, because that's basically how you create HTML emails, is a giant table. It is just, it just wears me out. So I would say take a course on it, and then go one step farther, and whatever you create, go into a professional email tester tool and maybe pay 1 month for it, and get that thing working across all clients, and see the true scope of what HTML email development is, and see if it's worth it for you. Because I've personally seen a lot of people who think that's the entryway into development, and they get burnt out and they don't do development because of it.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it.
Yeah, so it's easy to get into for a reason, because there's a high turnover rate and people hate it. So just do your due diligence and see how it is. It's for web dev, I mean, we do the same thing, right? We take courses, we build a website, we see how it is. So HTML email should be the same way.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for chatting with me. You're welcome anytime. It helps me, because that way I don't have to talk to myself, like a crazy person. But a lot of great advice, a lot of good stuff. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. If those of you are interested, I did start a Discord. It's still in the process of getting organized, but I'll put the link. Any of you guys want to join? The plan for that is to have content there that's not going to be available on YouTube, and basically help you guys build your first 5 projects to get hired. You could watch a video on my YouTube channel somewhere. I'm so tired that I can't even explain what we do, but that's that. I'll just put the link over there for Discord. And thank you for coming on again. Always great, always awesome. And that's all I got for today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We did it. No, it's awesome. It's awesome. I think it's good to I think it's good for people to be in a conversation between people that made the change that they're looking to make in their life. And for my channel is called Coding After 30. We both got into this field in our mid 30s, and we both kind of have a success story that was very hard to achieve but was achievable. I'm not saying you have to be in your 30s to apply this stuff, but the point is that we're living proof that we're sitting here and the stuff will work out eventually. but at the same time, none of us had an easy way to get here. And that's like the story here. The main takeaway is that you have to basically not take no for an answer. Like when I started learning, I didn't think I'm not going to get hired. That was not an option. I was just going to keep going, and then just keep going and keep at it, and then you will succeed. But, you know, everybody has their own journey to follow. So, you know, we're just here to give you, you know, our path and hope that you guys are able to apply what we told you and get to where you guys want to go. So,
Yeah, if you want me to come on again, I mean, you can just ping me
listen,
and I
don't
can
even
answer.
say that. Don't even say that, because I'll never leave you alone. Like, I'll be like, hey, come on again. Let's do it. No, just, yeah.
Well, I
No,
mean,
but yeah.
this is a perfect time. This is right after the kid goes to bed, so.
Nice, awesome. So yeah, no, that'll be great to have you. Thanks everyone for everything again. And so we're gonna cut out here because otherwise I'll do another hour, which I don't want to do. Nothing against you guys. Peace, love, and happiness. You know, thank you. We'll see you later.
All right. See.
Take care.